I was sleeping in my bathroom, curled up on the cold tile floor like a baby in the womb, knees pressed to my chest, arms wrapped tight around myself. The fluorescent light hummed above me. I could hear him in the bedroom, the glow of his phone screen probably lighting up his face as he scrolled through things I tried to pretend I didn't know about. This wasn't the first night I'd spent here. Sometimes the bathroom was the only place I felt safe enough to cry without him telling me I was crazy. I was 28 years old. I owned a house. I had a college degree. I had a job. And I was hiding in my own bathroom, praying to God to either change my husband or let me die. That night, I didn't know I was living with someone who would later confirm what I'd suspected for years, that I was nothing more than a prop in his performance, a trophy to prove to his family, to the church, to the world, that he was something he wasn't. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Ruth, and this is the story of how I survived 2 marriages that nearly destroyed me, and how I finally found the one thing I'd been searching for my entire life. I'm 32 now, living in my small house in Georgia with my plants and my hard-won peace. But to understand how I got here, I need to take you back. Way back. Before we continue, if you're going through something similar, or if this story is resonating with you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Leave a like so more women can find this story. This is a space of support, and you're not alone. The first thing you need to know about me is that I grew up hungry. Not the kind of hungry where you're waiting for dinner, the kind where hunger becomes part of your identity, where the fear of an empty plate follows you into adulthood like a shadow you can't shake. My great-great-grandfather came to America on a slave ship. He met my great-great-grandmother there, in that hell. They married, had children, all while enslaved. Eventually, they ended up in the South, Georgia, where poverty and scarcity became our family inheritance. My grandmother told me stories about feeding slaves in basement quarters. Barely any food. That scarcity passed down through every generation. My parents grew up poor. Their parents grew up poor. Hunger was our birthright. My father had it rough. His mother, my grandmother, was rigid, authoritarian, never showed love to her children. She'd make them collect cans from the streets, then keep all the money for herself. My dad grew up in extreme poverty and extreme religion. My mother's side descended from Native Americans. There's a story that my great-grandfather literally caught my great-grandmother with a lasso on a farm. She was a wild spirit from a local tribe. Both sides of my family carried this legacy of scarcity and survival. My parents met young, already deep in evangelical Christianity. My grandmother had converted from Catholicism to a strict Christian denomination, and she raised her kids in that extreme religiosity. Some of her children rebelled, but not my dad. He followed every rule. When my parents married, my mother's family didn't approve. She was a teacher in her hometown, had a profession, but she abandoned everything for love. They moved from Georgia to California so my dad could find work. I was conceived in the first month of their marriage. We lived in downtown Los Angeles initially, where there were more job opportunities. But my dad lost his job, and we moved to a rough area on the outskirts, basically an informal settlement. I was around 2 years old. We lived in a tarp shack. Let me say that again. A tarp shack. Plastic sheets for walls. No floor, just dirt. In California, it got cold at night. My mom had to walk 40 minutes just to get water. Another 40 minutes to catch a bus. That's the world I was born into. My mom had my middle sister in those conditions. My dad was unemployed. Mom couldn't work even though she was an excellent seamstress. There were no opportunities where we lived. There were times when there was nothing to eat. My dad would sometimes come home with candy. Just candy. Mom would melt it in water to give us something, anything, to drink. Other times we'd eat the leaves of vegetables because we couldn't afford the actual vegetable. Our oatmeal on good days was cornmeal mush. This was my childhood. This was normal. Then, when I was 4 years old, my mother got pregnant with her 3rd child, and everything fell apart. My mom started saying she wanted to die. I was too young to understand, but adults around us ignored it. It's just in her head, they'd say. Pregnancy hormones. Looking back now, I'm certain my mother had depression, severe depression. But in those days, in that world, nobody recognized it. The day before she went to the hospital to give birth to my youngest sister, she told my aunt, "This is the last corn I'll eat while alive. I'm going to have this baby, and I'm not coming back." She knew. Everyone laughed it off. Even when she showed my aunt where our clothes were kept, saying I won't be coming back from the hospital, they treated it like a joke. Mom walked over 40 minutes on foot to reach a place where she could catch a ride to the hospital. She went into labor. Something went wrong. Preeclampsia, they said later. The baby was born. My mother died. I remember the funeral even though I was only 4. It's one of those memories burned into your brain, the kind trauma preserves in perfect detail. I remember her lying in the casket. She wore a blue dress. She was beautiful. Long, dark hair like a river down her shoulders. The kind of hair that reminded you of her Native American heritage. I didn't understand death. I ran around the casket playing while my middle sister cried in my father's arms. My baby sister, the one whose birth killed our mother. I don't even remember where she was. Probably with a neighbor. Nobody from my mother's family came to the funeral. Not one person. My dad was 31 years old, suddenly alone with 3 daughters under 5. For a while, people talked about putting us in an orphanage. My paternal grandmother came from Georgia and took us back with her. She officially adopted my youngest sister, just verbally, nothing legal, and took her to raise. But she was cruel to me and my middle sister. When she brushed our hair, she'd hit our heads. She wasn't the warm, loving grandmother you see in movies. My dad found out about the mistreatment and came to get us, bringing us back to California. So there he was, a young widower with 2 small daughters, trying to work and survive. We bounced from house to house. Whoever would watch us so Dad could work. My mother's family never offered to help. My maternal grandmother never reached out. I still don't understand why. We stayed living in that poor area, that 40-minute walk from civilization. Then one day, Dad surprised us. He'd traded our shack for a small house closer to the bus stop. When he opened that door and said, "This is our house now," I cried with happiness. We didn't have to walk 40 minutes anymore. But the poverty continued. The hunger continued. The only times we ate meat were when we stayed with church families who had a bit more money. At home, it was hot dogs when things were good. Maybe chicken once or twice a year. Mostly rice and beans. Rice with carrots. Rice with flour. When we stayed with church families, we ate actual beef, pasta, ham, cheese, things that felt like luxury. When I was 9, staying at one of these church families' houses, a place we loved because the woman cooked amazing food, something changed. Her teenage son, maybe 15, started waking us up at night, trying to touch us. I was smart enough to know something was wrong. I'd move around in bed to show I was awake, shake my feet to protect my 7-year-old sister. I stopped sleeping. I'd doze off, but stay in that half-awake state, always watching, always protecting her. When I told the woman I didn't want to sleep in the living room anymore, she moved us to her daughter's room. But the daughters were jealous and mean. Then she moved us to her own bedroom. This happened twice, maybe 3 times. Then I told my dad, "I'm not going to anyone's house anymore. I'll stay home and take care of my sister." I was 9 years old. My sister was 7. Dad worked nights, so he'd lock us in the house when he left in the late afternoon. We'd stay locked inside until he came home in the morning. I'd pick up my sister from daycare in the late afternoon, then we'd lock ourselves in. We were obedient. We kept the house locked. We didn't open the door for anyone. This became our life. My dad became a pastor for a while. The religious rules were suffocating. No television. It was sinful. No pants for girls. Sinful. No makeup. No jewelry. No certain games. Playing ball was sinful. And fasting. "Today is a fasting day," Dad would announce. Nobody ate. Not even the dogs. Not even the cats. Everyone in the house fasted because God is pleased with fasting. But my dad had a good heart. I need to say that. Even with our scarcity, if he had 2 bags of rice, he'd give 1 away. He'd climb the hills in our neighborhood to bring food to families worse off than us. I'd get frustrated. "Dad, if you do that, we won't have enough." But he always said we had to share. He was an excellent cook. He'd make beautiful bread and bring it to people. When things were a tiny bit better, he shared. He genuinely had a good heart. Around age 9 or 10, a dream started growing inside me. I wanted to get married. Not because I understood love or partnership, because I thought marriage would give me what I'd lost. A family, a home where I belonged, a place where I'd finally have enough food, where I wouldn't be alone, where someone would love me. When I get married, I'd think, I'll have my family. I'll have my own house, my own things. I'll work. I'll be able to eat well. buy food, buy meat, buy the things I need. Marriage became my escape plan. My dad would even make jokes, inappropriate ones I realize now, about me marrying older men from church who had money and jobs. You should marry so-and-so. He'd laugh. At the time, I didn't understand how damaging that was for a preteen girl. The dream of marriage consumed me. It would fill the hole left by my mother's death. It would heal the brokenness. It would finally make me whole. At least, that's what I told myself. At 14, I had my first boyfriend. He was from church, just turned 18. The relationship lasted a few months before he cheated on me with a girl who'd been my friend. She's the one who told me. We caught him together. The three of us had a confrontation, and I ran home crying. He came to my house later, begging for forgiveness. I forgave him. My dad found out and made me end it. But I was heartbroken, kept going back to him. He'd set up meetings and not show up, leaving me waiting on street corners for hours. Months later, I found out he'd gotten the other girl pregnant. Then my dad decided to send me and my sister back to Georgia. Our grandmother kept saying we needed a woman's influence, that we were becoming young women and needed supervision. I was devastated. I didn't want to leave California, the only home I'd really known. I was still hung up on that boyfriend. The day we left, I walked with Dad carrying our bags to the bus station, looking back at my city, crying the whole way. We arrived at the bus station in Georgia. Our grandmother, the one who'd promised to take care of us, never showed up. An aunt had to pick us up. Then our grandmother got into a fight with that aunt, and the aunt kicked me out. I ended up at our grandmother's house after all. It was terrible. My grandmother was extremely rigid. Everything was forbidden in her ultra-strict religious denomination. No TV, no talking to neighbors, no pants, nothing. And the food issue was back with a vengeance. My grandmother hoarded food. She had a locked room where she hid cookies, fruit, sugar, everything. I'd come home from school starving, and there'd be no lunch. I'd search for sugar, couldn't find any. I discovered a community center near her house that fed kids after school. I started going there instead of staying home. At least there was food. I lived at my grandmother's for only a few months. I didn't have money for basic necessities. I was a young woman now. I couldn't even buy pads. I used socks, washed them and reused them. Sometimes an uncle would visit and give me $5 or $10. I'd save it to buy hair conditioner, pads, underwear. I got sick from the temperature change moving from California. The doctor ordered tests. "Grandma, I need bus fare." She refused. I walked almost 2 hours to the doctor's appointment. She made me clean the house constantly. When I told my dad, he removed me from her care and arranged for me to stay with my maternal uncle instead. That's when I got separated from my sister again. She stayed with another aunt. The separation broke my heart. Despite our childhood fights, I was deeply attached to her. At my uncle's house, I was finally stable enough to get a job. At 15, I started working at a retail store owned by the sister of my uncle's wife's brother. Yes, that's convoluted. Welcome to extended family. I finally had my own money. I could buy hair conditioner, pads, underwear. I bought my first cell phone. I worked there from 15 to 18. My boss was racist. He'd say things like, "Look at your skin color. You won't get a job anywhere else." It was manipulation to keep me there for low wages. But sometimes he'd be nice. At Christmas, he'd take me and my sister to a restaurant, let us eat whatever we wanted. I moved from my uncle's house to another uncle's house, the one with more money who used to give me those $5 or $10. This house had food at least, but his daughter was jealous of me living there. I slept in their storage pantry, literally a closet full of food, rats, and cockroaches. Not in the main house, in the pantry. They gradually restricted my access to the main house. No TV privileges. I couldn't watch the shows I liked. The only parts of the house I could access were the kitchen and the outdoor bathroom. I lived like that for about a year, increasingly humiliated and constrained. When I visited my dad during vacation, I told him, "I can't take it anymore. Either I come back to California, or I'm going to live on my own." Dad didn't want me returning to California. The neighborhood was rough, lots of drugs and crime. "Okay, Dad." Then I'm living alone. I was 16. The day I moved out of my uncle's house, I'll never forget it. His wife and daughter grabbed my stuff. I only had a dresser with my clothes and some school books, and literally threw it on the sidewalk. Like, "Get out. You're annoying us." My uncle had a car but refused to help me move. Church friends came with a construction wheelbarrow and carried my dresser to the small room I'd rented. When I arrived, I had nothing, just my clothes and that dresser. A school friend loaned me a thin mattress. I put it on top of 2 benches pushed together. That was my bed. Someone from church found me a stove and a gas tank. I had no refrigerator, no TV, but since I worked all day and ate lunch at work, I managed. My dad helped eventually, buying me a refrigerator and a TV. I survived. My uncle's wife threatened to report my dad to child services for letting a 16-year-old live alone. But what choice did I have? The family that was supposed to love me had shown me none. If this story is speaking to you, if you see yourself in parts of Ruth's journey, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe. Turn on notifications. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. You're not alone in this. I worked all day, studied at night. I was in high school, exhausted. I'd come home, shower quickly, go to school. Then I'd fall asleep in class because I was so tired. My grades suffered. The landlord charged me for electricity, $80, which was expensive back then in 2005-2006. Later, I found out he'd rigged the meter. I was paying for both houses. When I discovered this and confronted him, we had a huge fight. I moved to another place closer to my school and work. After high school, I continued working with no real prospects. I felt a deep sadness. I was so lonely. I lived in the same city as my extended family, but nobody reached out. Nobody cared. I kept chasing after them, trying to fill that void, but they never reciprocated. At 18, I left that retail job and became a secretary at a company. I got my motorcycle license, bought a bike through payment plans, about $100 a month. With the bike, I thought maybe I could figure out a way to go to college. But how? Public university entrance exams were nearly impossible with my poor education. Private college was expensive. Better jobs required more education. I was stuck. I stayed active in church, the same one on my street. I cried at every service. I felt such crushing loneliness. Everyone else had parents, families. I was completely alone, far from my sister. The worship music would start, and I'd just break down. People didn't understand why I cried so much. My dream of marriage intensified. When I get married, I'll have my family. I won't feel this sadness anymore. But here's something nobody talks about. There's loneliness for Black women even in church. The girls who got boyfriends first, who married the best men, were always the prettier ones. Long straight hair, light skin. There's this hierarchy. I was considered the skinny, ugly one who didn't dress well, because I couldn't afford nice clothes or shoes for church. No young man was interested in me. I watched the pretty girls date and marry while I stayed invisible. I had a couple of brief things with guys from school, but nothing serious. In church, it was even harder. The good Christian boys went for the beautiful girls. At 20, still single, I already felt old, like I'd missed my chance. In that same church, I met a man about 10 or 11 years older than me. He was a preacher. He wore suits and spoke from the pulpit. I had a fantasy about marrying a preacher. A woman from church who was friends with both of us set us up. He'd been married before and had a daughter. We dated for maybe 2 months, but only because I insisted. He wasn't into me at all. He barely called. Back then, we didn't have WhatsApp. He'd just ignore my calls. Our relationship lasted 2 months. Then he came to preach at my church and broke up with me right there, outside after the service. I wanted to die. I went home sobbing, hiccuping from crying so hard. Church friends came over to comfort me because I couldn't stop. Later I found out he said he didn't like me, that I was too young. Then he started dating a 15-year-old girl from church. He was 31. That girl eventually did to him what he'd done to me, broke up with him in front of the church. Karma. When I was almost 21, there was an event at church. A couple I was friends with, they'd helped me get my secretary job, mentioned that a different guy was single. Oh, really? Who? They described him. He acted like he was religious, always at church. My eyes lit up. Maybe this was my chance. We arranged a dinner at their house after a service. I'd get to meet him. I spent that week in agony waiting for Saturday. When I saw him, I noticed. He was tall, dark-skinned. I'd always liked dark-skinned men, wearing nice clothes. He said he'd been working for several years. After dinner, we connected. I don't even remember if there was an official "will you be my girlfriend" moment. We just started dating from that night. I already had a trip scheduled to visit my dad in California. This man panicked. She's going to leave and never come back. It was just a visit. But truthfully, I had thought about moving back to California. I was very attached to my dad. While I was visiting my dad for a month, this man called constantly, sent text messages nonstop. He was obsessed, convinced I wouldn't return. Near the end of my visit, he mentioned buying a ring. He must be joking, I thought. Then he called. I need to know what you want from me if you want something serious because I'm not playing games. I want to get married. We'd known each other for 1 month. 1 month. I said, well, yes, I want to get married eventually. Then we're getting engaged. When you get back, we're having an engagement ceremony at church. I thought he was kidding about the ring. He wasn't. Later, I found out he didn't pay cash like he claimed. He'd financed it. He lied about everything. When I returned, he'd already talked to the pastor. We got engaged. 1 month of knowing each other, and we were engaged in front of the whole church. No counseling. The pastor didn't sit me down to ask, "Are you sure?" I had nobody to turn to. No family member, no support system. Just me and my desperate dream of marriage. I looked at my engagement ring constantly. My childhood dream is coming true. We started planning the wedding, but warning signs were everywhere. This man had no ambition. He hadn't finished high school. He lived far from me, would say he took the bus to visit, but he'd arrive on foot. He'd walked because he had no money for the bus. I thought it was romantic. He loves me so much. He walks to see me. He'd come over and just sit there, staring at me while I tried to sleep because I had work in the morning. I thought this was love. Looking back, these were all massive red flags. Before the wedding, I visited the room he rented behind some woman's house. When I walked in, my jaw dropped. He had nothing. A mattress on the floor, clothes thrown everywhere. Chaos. He was 9 years older than me, working age, but he hadn't managed to buy himself a bed frame. Not even a basic dresser. Red flag. Huge red flag. But instead of running, I thought, poor guy. We'll build everything together. I made excuses for him. It rained on our wedding day. Not drizzled, poured. One of the heaviest rainstorms that year. The ceremony was at church, with a reception space out back that the pastor was building. Everything got soaked. My things, the decorations, everything. I was at the salon getting ready, panicking about the rain, and whether guests could even make it in this weather. The ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m., but between the rain chaos and last-minute problems, we didn't start until almost 11. The guests huddled under tarps and umbrellas, water dripping everywhere. The wedding itself was beautiful despite the rain. I dreamed of entering while singing. I sang in church, and I got to do that. I rode in a blue Volkswagen Beetle. But here's the thing. I realize now why the wedding was so important to me. As a child, I was never seen, never noticed. I grew up discarded, invisible. I never had nice clothes or a costume for school like other kids. I never had those moments where adults fuss over you and tell you how special you look. The wedding was my childhood self finally getting to be a princess, finally being seen, finally getting attention. I didn't love him. I loved the idea I'd created in my head. After the reception, we went home. No honeymoon, no trip. Just home. I was a virgin. I'd saved myself because that's what the church taught. No sex before marriage or you'll go to hell. The wedding night was a disaster. This man wasn't romantic, wasn't gentle. Nothing happened. He was frustrated for 3 days. When it finally happened, it was terrible. And that set the tone for everything that followed. Within the first month of marriage, he got fired from his job. Great, I thought. We just got married and he's unemployed. Months passed. He didn't find work. Because he didn't look for work. He'd sleep in until late. I'd leave for work. He'd stay home. Instead of job hunting, he'd go to friends' houses. I felt sorry for him. Poor thing. He can't find a job. So I started buying newspapers, circling opportunities for him. I created his resume. I submitted applications on his behalf. Meanwhile, I worked and made sure there was always food in the house. He got comfortable. Why look for work when his wife was taking care of everything? I'd gone from one relationship where I fought alone to another relationship where I fought alone. I started night classes for a pre-university prep course. I wanted to pass the entrance exam for the state university, my only shot at higher education since I couldn't afford private college. I'd work from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. at a call center, study at a library from 1 to 6:30 p.m., then go to prep class until 10 p.m. My husband would finally get a job, then pick fights, and get himself fired. It was constant. I persevered in prayer like I'd been taught. If a woman perseveres in prayer, her husband will change. The wise woman builds her house. The foolish one tears it down. I thought it was my responsibility to save him through prayer. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. to pray. I'd do prayer campaigns. I fought for that marriage alone. We lived rent-free as caretakers of a church for a while. The living conditions were awful. Leaky roof. I had to cover our furniture with tarps before going to work. But I kept finding things on his phone. Pornography. He'd cry and apologize. I'm weak. It reminds me of my childhood trauma. I forgave him. Over and over. He kept spending money on friends instead of our household. He'd finance things at stores, then not pay, ruining his credit. He'd buy gifts for church friends while contributing nothing at home. When I finally confronted him about money he'd borrowed for a friend's wedding, while we were living in a church storage room in poverty, he manipulated me into feeling guilty. I became severely depressed. I started having physical symptoms, constant colds, sinus infections, stomach problems. I was so sick all the time. Relationships with abusive, manipulative people make you physically ill. After about 3 years, I'd had enough. We were living in California by then. I'd convinced him to move, thinking distance from his friends would help. It didn't. One night I told him, I want a divorce. You can't divorce me. You'll go to hell. I already live in hell, I said. I live in hell right here on earth. I just want to die. I'm curled up in corners crying. I'm already dead inside. What other hell could be worse than this? I'd spent years begging God to either change him or let me die. I'd walk down the street hoping a truck would hit me, but I'd never actually kill myself. The church taught that suicide sends you to hell. The day I decided to leave, he burned our wedding photo in the yard, probably trying to intimidate me. That night, I slept literally hugging garbage bags full of my clothes and shoes, terrified he'd burn my belongings. He'd already smashed my phone so I couldn't contact anyone, but I'd already arranged for my dad to pick me up the next day. My dad rescued me. I spent 6 months praying and researching divorce from a biblical perspective, reading everything I could find, studying in different languages. I stopped asking pastors. I went straight to the source. The God I believed lived inside me, not outside in a church building. And I felt peace, complete peace about leaving. I went to my HR department at work. I need you to lay me off. I'm in an abusive relationship. I need unemployment benefits to escape. They tried to make me stay, but I insisted. I returned to Georgia without my husband, went to live with my sister. When I told him it was over, he threatened me. I filed a restraining order. Finally, he agreed to an amicable divorce. The lawyer, who was our mutual friend, convinced him it was better than going to court with a restraining order on his record. 1 week later, the divorce was final. We had no kids, no assets. I was free. After the divorce, I was depressed, alone, struggling. I'd lost the dream I'd built my whole life around. In 2018, I started visiting a new church. The atmosphere was different. Welcoming, lots of events, community. I joined the young adults group. For someone who'd spent her whole life searching for family, this felt like coming home. That's where I met husband number 2. He was quiet, kept to himself, newly returned to church after some time away. I wasn't initially interested, but a mutual friend kept saying, "He likes you." He started pursuing me, calling me beautiful, asking to take photos together. He'd bring me food when I mentioned I liked something, fish, cake, whatever I wanted. Remember, I grew up starving. Food, love to me. He was using my childhood trauma against me, though I didn't realize it yet. He'd send good morning messages. Good morning, beautiful. Good morning, princess. After my divorce, feeling rejected and worthless, someone calling me beautiful felt like a miracle. We started dating. He insisted on keeping it holy. No physical contact because he didn't want to sin. I thought this meant he was serious, different from my first husband. Red flag number 1. He was always on his phone. Red flag number 2. He was completely different with friends than with me. With friends, he laughed, smiled, was animated. With me alone, he was silent, distant, cold. Red flag number 3. When I'd try to hug him, he'd push me away. "You're making me too hot." But I romanticized everything. He's just being respectful. He wants to keep the relationship pure. He organized an elaborate proposal at church. Flowers, the whole congregation watching. It was a spectacle. I'd told him I didn't want a church wedding, didn't want a big production. I want to do this for my family, he said. I want to make my mom and sister proud. I've never been married. So I gave in. I started planning everything, made the invitations by hand, collected glass bottles to decorate, organized every detail. Looking back, I realize he wanted the performance. He wanted to prove to his family and the church that he was normal, that he could marry a woman. I was his prop. A month before the wedding, I checked his phone again. Gay pornography, videos, multiple men together, searches for male escorts. I should have run. Instead, I woke him up. What is this? He cried. I was abused as a child. These images remind me of my trauma. I'm sorry. I'm weak. What kind of abuse victim seeks out images of their abuse for comfort? It makes no sense. But I believed him. I told our mutual friend, the one who'd introduced us. I told my pastor. The pastor prayed over a letter my fiancé wrote about his struggle, then told me, God says this marriage is blessed. It's from God. You should marry him. That pastor had complete power over me. If he said the sun was green, I'd believe him. Everyone validated the wedding. The pastor, the church, our friends, the prophets who'd laid hands on us and said God had brought us together, the premarital counseling we'd done. My therapist later told me, you weren't just believing him. Your entire environment validated that you should marry him. The wedding venue fell through 2 weeks before the ceremony. The grass was dead, everything wrong. We found another beautiful venue with wooden benches, a wooden walkway, a wooden gazebo. Perfect. His family arrived from out of state 1 week before the wedding. His mother and sister. I'd never met them in person. We'd only talked on the phone. Red flag. When they arrived, I felt immediate negative energy. No warmth, no welcome to the family, nothing. Just heavy, judging stares. The wedding was scheduled for 10 a.m. I arrived early to help with final preparations. 10:30. Nothing. 11, still nothing. The guests were sitting in blazing sun. I called the coordinator. Why haven't we started? Your mother-in-law and sister-in-law haven't arrived yet. I was furious. I texted my sister-in-law. Where are you? Everyone's waiting. This is disrespectful. She immediately forwarded my text to my fiancé. When he finally arrived to start the ceremony after 11 a.m., he'd been crying. His face was swollen. I thought it was emotion. It was rage. At me. His mother and sister left right after eating, didn't even stay for the reception. After the wedding, he disappeared to spend time with his family who were staying at a hotel. I waited at home, confused and hurt. When he came home around 10 p.m., he was a different person. The man I'd married at 5 p.m. wasn't the man who walked through the door at 10 p.m. Different eyes, different expression, closed off. On our wedding night, he turned his back to me and went to sleep. I poked him. Weren't you the one who wanted to keep it holy until marriage? He grudgingly went through the motions. It was awful. Our married life was hell from day one. He blamed everything on me. I disrespected his sister. I didn't love his family. He rarely initiated intimacy. When he did, it was with his eyes closed. Now I understand why. He'd work 2 jobs, partially because we wanted to save for a car, but mostly because it kept him away from me. He'd come home after midnight, claiming he was working. I had no access to his phone. Ever. 6 years of marriage, never once allowed to see his phone. If I asked who he was texting, you're crazy. If I tried to hug him, you're too hot. Get away. With friends, he was a different person. Laughing, smiling, animated. At home, he was cold, silent, distant. I called him ogre as a joke, trying to make light of it, but it wasn't funny. He hated being married to me. I got sick. Constantly. Anxiety attacks so severe I'd end up in the ER thinking I was having a heart attack. The cardiologist finally said, "You keep coming back with the same symptoms. This is anxiety. Chronic colds, sinus infections, stomach problems, insomnia, nightmares." My body was screaming at me to leave, but I couldn't hear it. I'd sleep in the bathroom again, curled up on the floor. I'd have encounters with what felt like evil itself, waking up unable to breathe, feeling something crushing my throat. The oppression was overwhelming. After we bought a car together, My dream finally realized. He got worse, more distant, more cruel. He'd gaslight me constantly. You're crazy. You're imagining things. You're the problem. One November day in 2023, he had a motorcycle accident, broke his collarbone. I took care of him during recovery. A couple weeks later, I came home from work exhausted. It was hot. I sat on his lap playfully. He pushed me off. You're too hot. Get away. He went to finish cooking. I grabbed his phone and locked myself in the bathroom. I filmed everything I found so he couldn't claim I was making it up. Gay pornography. 3-4 men together. Paid subscription sites. Searches for male escorts. Everything. The scales fell from my eyes completely. I called our mutual friend, sobbing, I can't do this anymore. I told him I want a divorce. He cried, begged, promised to change. I didn't care anymore. I told him to leave. He refused, said he'd leave when he was healed enough to work again. We lived in the same house, separated for about a month. One night during that month, I had the worst nightmare of my life. I looked up and asked God, why do I keep having these nightmares? The moment I closed my eyes, I saw the devil himself, like a hawk, land on top of me, pressing down, suffocating me. And I heard the answer. This right here. This is what's trying to kill you. All the depression, the sickness, the anxiety, the nightmares, it was all meant to destroy me, to make me give up and die. I screamed the blood of Jesus, and it left. That was the last nightmare I ever had. Soon after, he moved out. I started sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. All my health problems began to disappear. The friend who'd introduced us, who I considered my sister, she ghosted me after I said I wanted a divorce. She stayed friends with him. Later I understood. He'd performed the role of perfect Christian man so well that everyone believed I was the problem. The crazy ex-wife who didn't love his family, who wasn't affectionate enough. He'd used me as a trophy to prove to his family and the church that he wasn't gay. And it worked. I found out later his sister had told him, I won't accept having a gay brother. It's shameful to our family. In a message exchange after our separation, he confirmed it himself. This is a curse on my life. I'm so sad I was born this way. He was born gay, and instead of accepting himself, he destroyed my life to maintain an illusion. The divorce was finalized quickly. No kids, no shared assets except the car, which he kept. I went back to riding a motorcycle. Then I had an accident that left my arm permanently crooked. Then I fell into a septic tank in my yard one night and nearly died. Only my injured arm, stuck out to the side, kept me from falling all the way in. 2024 was brutal, but 2025, that's when the post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis came. My therapist explained, your nervous system lived in constant alert mode for years. Now that you're safe, your body doesn't know how to turn off the alarm. I get dizzy when I drive. My body still thinks I need to be hypervigilant. I'm on medication, in therapy, working through it, but I'm also at peace. I don't go to church anymore. I found God, the real one, inside myself. Not in a building, not through a pastor, not through religious performance. I spent 2 years completely alone. No family visits, no healing visits from church friends. Nobody. Just me, God, and my plants. I built a pergola in my yard. I named it New Beginning. I planted a tree that wouldn't grow while my ex-husband lived here. Now it's enormous. Every time I look at that pergola, I see my resurrection. I have a boyfriend now, but I don't need him to feel complete. I can spend weekends alone and love it. I'm not codependent anymore. I sleep peacefully. I work. I pay my bills. I don't depend on any man to survive. I'm not afraid of hunger anymore. I'm not afraid of scarcity. I'm not afraid of being alone. Those fears controlled my whole life, drove me into 2 terrible marriages. Not anymore. My mother died rather than leave my father. Years later, I learned my father had his own unresolved issues around sexuality. I think my mother discovered the truth and couldn't face the shame, the judgment, the religious condemnation. So she gave up. She chose death. I broke that cycle. I chose life. I did what my mother couldn't do. I left. I survived. And in doing so, I think I healed something for her too. Nobody loves you more than you love yourself. Nobody. Not church leaders, not family, not friends, not husbands, Pastors are human beings, not gods. Their opinions aren't divine mandates. Prayer alone won't save an abusive relationship. You can't pray someone into changing. They have to want to change. The wise woman builds her house teaching is weaponized against women. You can't build a house alone. Marriage takes two people. Your body knows before your mind does. Listen to it. People who truly love you won't isolate you, control you, or make you feel crazy. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away. I'm 32 years old. I have a small house. I take care of myself. I have a job. I have my plants and my pergola named New Beginning. I have peace. The trauma still surfaces sometimes. The PTSD, the dizziness, the hypervigilance. But I'm working through it with professional help. I found the family I was searching for my whole life. It's me. I'm my own family. I'm my own home. And I finally have what I was looking for all along. Unconditional love, safety, peace, enough food, a place to belong. It was inside me the whole time. If you're reading this and you're stuck in a relationship that's killing you slowly, I want you to know something. The judgment of others isn't worth your life. The shame of divorce isn't worth your sanity. The fear of starting over isn't worth staying in hell. I walked away from 2 marriages. I'm a twice-divorced woman in the South. And I've never been happier or healthier. You are stronger than you know. You are worthy of truth, of respect, of real love, and you will survive this. I promise.